And we're live. Hello, everybody. How lovely to see you here. My name's Jamie Keddy. It's been some time, hasn't it? We've not done one of these for not just weeks, but months. I think it's what happened, really. I don't know what happened exactly where, but I think it turned into summer at one point, and making videos and doing lives like this during the summer here in Barcelona is just absolutely miserable. It's just a big sweaty business. So I think I decided to put it on ice for a while, but then summer is over, the coolness is back, and here we are. And it's nice to see so many of you. Look at this. Who was it that said that? Someone said, there's hello, Daniela. Hello, Gabriella. Look at this comment here from Dirce. Looking forward to this all week. It's great to see you. Maria, nice to see you there. And Lydia and Richard, and that's me, just in case. Sonia, Christina, lovely to see you. Thank you so much. For just a little bit of a disclaimer before we get started. A trigger warning, actually, because I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago about what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be exploring one video. Some of you may know this video. It's a video that involves an egg, a real egg. It involves one real egg, one fake egg made out of plastic, two victims, and one prankster. And the friend that I was telling this to said that he's got a friend who would freak out because his friend suffers from ovophobia, which is something I'd never heard of before. But ovophobia is an irrational fear of eggs or egg-related things. And so if you have ovophobia, if you have an irrational fear of eggs, then maybe, I don't know, stop watching and go do something else, because I don't want you to freak out as a result of this video, all right? I mean, it is Friday afternoon after all, and it's almost the weekend, and also it's a holiday. It's a holiday. Who's on holiday? I had no idea. I completely forgot that it was a holiday. By the way, I've just remembered, I always start by asking people if they can you hear me? I forgot to do that. It's been so long since we've done this that I forgot to ask you if you can hear me and if you can see me. So please do let me know. And hello, Brad. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Then I know that I'm just not talking to a big empty void like an idiot, which is something we've done before. Hello, Daniela. Lovely to see you. So let me just show you what's going on here. This is a session titled A Story-Based Approach to Video. What I've got for you is a 7-step template to working with short videos. As I've said already, it involves the video that we're going to be working with involves a prankster, a real egg, one fake egg made of plastic, and also two victims. So if you don't like eggs, nothing for you to see here. Now, just before we get started, I wonder if any of you took part in the questionnaire that I did not so long ago. What I did was I sent out a questionnaire to my email subscribers. It was all about how teachers make use of video in 2024. I'm going to assume that some of you are watching this right now completed it, and I'm going to just share some of the results with you, because I found this to be very interesting. Exactly 164 different people completed it, and the first question was, how often as a teacher do you make use of video content in your classroom? And feel free just to answer that question right now. How often do you make use of video content in your classroom? Every day, maybe once a week, once a month, or less than that. Hardly ever would probably be the best way to express that. That was the question I put. That was one of the very first questions in the questionnaire. How often do use video? And let me just show you what I got back here. Now, this might not be representative of teachers in general, because the kind of teacher that was more inclined, of course, to complete this questionnaire may be the kind of teacher that works with video more often than not. So let me just show you what we got here. We got 40% of teachers said most days. This is out of 164 responses. Another 40% said at least once a week. So that's 80% of teachers, we could say, use video content in their teaching a lot. That's very different, isn't it? The days before YouTube video. Do you remember the days before YouTube? I wonder if any of you are old enough. I remember booking that TV and wheeling it into the classroom, and we were obliged to stick with a diet of Mr. Bean and Wallace and Gromit and Friends, that kind of thing. So video seems to be pretty important. And the second question that I asked in the questionnaire was, how do you use it? For what purpose? And again, feel free to type your answers into the chat. How do you use video in your teaching? What purpose? What do you use it for? And let me show you what the results came back here were. Perhaps less surprisingly, I would say, the most number one, developing listening skills. Hardly any surprise there. Number two, for introducing topics. Number three, teaching vocabulary and grammar and context. Number four, seeding discussion, setting up speaking. And number five, providing cultural insight. So at least for the questionnaire that I sent out, these seem to be the top 5 reasons for using them. Now, this was an open-ended question, so you could have said anything you wanted. That means that I enlisted the help of ChatGPT to kind of provide some analysis here. And this is what ChatGPT came up with. Right. The third question is, and this is a very important one. I think this is maybe not spoken about enough. We talk about video, we talk about how much we use video, we talk about what we do with it. But I think maybe what's not stated enough is what kind of video what kind of video content do teachers make use of? And again, feel free to type your own answers to that question in the chat. What kind of video content do you make use of in the classroom? And let me just show you. I find this very interesting. I wonder if you can guess what number 1 is. For me, what's quite interesting is number 2. Let me show you the answers here. Number 1, short films followed by TED Talks, news clips, then documentaries, adverts, video content for young learners, interviews, trailers, film trailers, I suppose, and viral videos. Slightly undefined there, but isn't that interesting? I mean, TED Talks, that must be testament to the success of TED. I personally have a bit of a love-hate relationship with TED Talks, but it turns out that teachers seem to embrace it wholeheartedly. And yes, so I mean, I wonder if there's anything we can take away from all this. Some things maybe are less surprising. I think if we're going to look at a history of video in English language teaching, some things have not changed. I mean, if we go back to the 1970s, which is when teachers started to embrace not video per se, but audio lingual material, let's say, much more in the shape of TV. I think that the excitement for it came from the possibilities of, bringing real life context to the classroom and bringing sort of meaning to the language, providing a context, bringing the language to life. And there was a tendency, I think, for video to be very much associated with listening. It was almost like listening with pictures, moving images. So that, if that was the number 1 reason or purpose for using video all those decades ago, perhaps that's not changed. I would suspect that there was less using video to set up discussions, or rather introducing topics, which is quite a strange one, that, isn't it? Using video for introducing topics. What do you think of that? Seeding discussion. It's funny because we talk about bringing these real life contexts into the classroom, but back then, all those decades ago, real life contexts were generally provided by native speakers of English doing very sort of stereotypical things according to, let's say, their gender roles. You know the kind of thing I'm talking about. So a few of you here have kind of reiterated some of the same things that we've just spoken about. TED Talks there. Hello, Nicole, and hello, Vielle. Using video for lead-in, that kind of thing. But I think that, really, if I think about myself here anyway, and I think about my reasons for having worked with video in the past, I think it can be maybe extended to let's say, authentic materials in general. When I say authentic materials, I'm talking here about materials which were not specifically created for language teaching or language learning purposes. Of course, we could be using video that was created for language learning, language teaching purposes, but in the purposes of this session, that's not what we're dealing with. So what we are dealing with is video in the form of sort of authentic materials. And if you ask anybody why they would use authentic materials in the classroom, one of the very first reasons to be put forward is that we use authentic materials because they provide a source of authentic language. However, I'm not so sure if that is the true reason why teachers go in search of authentic materials. In my mind, often the authentic language provides a barrier, provides all sorts of problems, all sorts of culturally problematic terms or idiomatic language or low frequency words, things that are really going to cause bumps in the carpet for our students. So although that might be what we think we're using, and often we are, I would say there's a second reason that for me is a much more important reason for using authentic materials, in this case video. I wonder if you can guess what it is that I'm talking about. Daniela says a challenge. That could come with authentic materials, or rather the authentic language. But for me, and I have absolutely, without any doubt of this, for my own personal approach, the reason I'm attracted to authentic materials is that, quite simply, that is where the best stories are. And that really is what this is all about today. It's all about where are the best stories. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to really regard video as the story. Okay, and if you noticed the title of this session, it was a story-based approach to video, and there was a 7-step template for applying this to your own videos. Now, let's just, before we start, we looked at all these different types of video. We looked at TED Talks, documentaries, adverts, short films, etc., etc. But what we're going to do here is we're not going to be talking about video in this everything open to all sorts of video. We're going to be focusing on a very specific type of video. And it's the kind of video which is very short in length. Maybe it is strong in story, and perhaps the language, the spoken text, the dialogue, the monologue, etc., is maybe less important than the moving images. So we're looking really for these short stories, short bite-sized narratives that come to us through TikTok, through Instagram, maybe also through YouTube. And that's what this is all about. And what I'm really interested in doing is there's 3 things, and this is what we're going to be doing in my course as well, which is coming very soon. There's 3 things, and the first thing is looking at the ways to maximize the potential of the material. That is, in other words, to take that. Let's say we're working with a 2-minute video, okay, a short 2-minute video, even less. In this case, the video we're going to use, the egg video, is about, I think it's about 30 seconds long. How can we take that 30-second video and turn it into a whole 90-minute lesson plan? How is that even possible? Well, it absolutely is. If you approach it as you would a story, it's possible to take that short 30-second or 2-minute video, take what we can refer to as a slow release approach to it, and turn it into a whole 60 or 90-minute lesson plan. So that's really something that I'm interested in doing. A lot of teachers aren't in the position to do that because they're obliged to work with the course book, but that's my approach. That's what I'm really interested in doing, is maximizing the potential of the material. The second thing is using that video, or rather using the story and using it to immerse students in the language. So there's language coming all the time. But really importantly, because you're using this story, you know how to make your students curious. Curiosity, as we will see, because I'm going to be demonstrating all of this, curiosity is the essential ingredient. As teachers, we can talk about storytelling, but we can also talk about story managing or story using. And that's what we're doing. It's knowing how to use the story to make students curious, to actually motivate them to listen. But the third thing, of course, it's not just about immersing them in language, it's also about challenging them. This is something that Daniela just said. Challenging students and motivating them also to do stuff, to speak, to collaborate, to solve problems, to discuss all these sort of things and much, much more. So those are the two things that I think are the three things I'm always trying to get out of a video, is to use the story, use that short video, recognize the story to maximize it right into fill a whole class lesson plan of 60 minutes, let's say. Also use it to immerse students by keeping them curious, to keep on listening to the language. And 3, challenge them to do things. So if I can do those 3 things in a lesson, then I feel the lesson has been a success. All right. So, thank you very much. That's a very lovely comment. I wish I'd set up my fan, which is something I usually do, but I forgot. So I'm going to start to get a little bit hot here. It's November, still a bit sweaty, but what can you do? Absolutely nothing. So let's start the session, shall we? We've referred to this as a 7-step approach, or rather, I think a 7-step template, a template that you can apply to specific types of video. I'm going to show you what it looks like before we start. This is the template right here, the 7 steps. So the first step is story priming, then there's the text, then there's the teacher story, then there's the video, then there's the text revisited, then there's discussion, analysis, interpretation, then there's the student story. And that's what it looks like. And I don't want you to think that this, as you see it here, is a sort of prescriptive approach. It's not. There's always possibility for changing the order. In some cases, one of these steps might be omitted. So it is actually a sort of malleable template here. We can change it according to the video that we're working with, the story that we're working with, the possibilities that we see. And so let's start. What is story priming? Anyway, story priming. And this is a term that I use. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but before you start a story in the class, and that could be using a video, it could be using an image, it could be using a short text. We talk about pre-listening. We talk about pre-reading. I wonder if you've got the same experience as me, that pre-listening or that pre-reading is so often a moment of maximized student curiosity and motivation. We ask a few questions that are going to prime students for the text or the video, whatever. And there's something about it. We've got students' attention. There's something about before the main event that students seem to be motivated, maybe more than afterwards in any case. And this is definitely my experience, and I can't assume it's yours, but I suspect that it might be. And so a story priming is any sort of mini task or technique that you do, which is going to prime students for the story ahead. And in this case, to give you an example of a story priming task, you could tell students that you're going to show them a video. You're going to show them a video which involves an egg, also a real egg, that is, also a fake egg made out of plastic, 2 victims and 1 prankster. So this is a technique that I refer to as story items. Those are 4 story items. They're all essential to the story that you're going to meet, the story that you're going to hear, the story you're going to view. And of course, there's a very natural task here for students is, can you predict what happens in this video? Now, the word prank, thanks to early YouTube, is quite an internationally known word, isn't it? And most people seem to know what a prank is. A prank is also known as a practical joke, a trick that you play on somebody. And somebody who plays practical jokes, somebody who pranks other people, we can refer to as a prankster. So the students I've tried this with have usually been quite quick to work out what is going on here is a prank. There's a prank at the heart of the story, and we're working obviously with a prank video. So the question then becomes, what is the nature of the prank? In other words, how does it work? And then students go into little groups, and they've got to try and come up with a theory. They've got to try and put into words specifically how this prank works and write down their answer to create a short text. Now, it's really funny, because I was just thinking quite recently, where did I get this activity from? And this is a classic way to start a story. I'm sure you've seen it before. It's definitely not my original idea. I've seen it many times before. It's such a motivating, curiosifying way to do things. And I remember once seeing this demonstrated at a conference. What happened was the conference speaker was demonstrating these story items. I think there was 3 or 4. I don't remember what the story was, but she invited the audience to predict what the story was about and what happens. And then she asked this room full of teachers, so why did I just do that? What's the value? What are the pedagogical reasons for me doing that? And some teacher in the front row put up their hand and said, quite sagely, to activate learning centers in the mind. And I'd only been teaching for a couple of years, and I thought, wow, activating learning centers in the mind. I obviously don't know my shit. And it wasn't until a while later of reflecting upon that experience and thinking about it, that was an example, and there's a lot of examples in our profession, of bullshit. I mean, what are learning centers in our mind? I've got absolutely no idea. 20 years later, I still don't know what they are. And I get slightly frustrated when pedagogy is put into this sort of esoteric language that nobody understands. So I want to just tell you why I think that what you've just seen here, has value. What are my reasons for starting a story in this way? And I said to you before, I've already said this is a technique specifically that I refer to as story items, but more general, I call this story priming. And this is just one of many different story priming tasks. Okay, so let me give you 5 reasons for doing this. Number 1, language input. What you see in front of you, provides me, the teacher, with an opportunity to prime students for language that they're going to meet when they meet the story. It's as simple as that. There may be potentially problematic words. We could talk about, let's say, pre-teaching, if you want to say that, but just activating key language that students are going to meet when they meet the story text. As simple as that. Number 2, that was the input. Number 2 is the output. This provides an opportunity to get students speaking or to get students writing. They could ask you, the teacher, questions to try and work out how this prank works. As a teacher, you can only answer yes or no. And once students have asked a few questions, put them into groups, put them into pairs, ask them to work together to try to work out exactly how this prank works. And in my experience, most people have got an idea, although they're wrong the first time. So I think there's always something that people can say. There's always a prediction for students to make. By the way, just again, my preferred way to do this would be to demand that every group doesn't just come up with a sort of, that does come up with a very specific idea by writing it down. I want to see a text from every group in the class. And actually what we're dealing with here is a text which takes the form of a process text, almost like a little recipe perhaps, but we'll come back to that again later. So that's number one, is the input language. Number two is the output language, input from teacher, outputs from students. Number three, comprehension. Now, students are aware that these things here are going to be involved in the story that they're about to meet. Now, whether or not they make a prediction by writing it down or speaking, whether or not you do that, there's always going to be a prediction happening here in your mind. It's impossible not to. That's the nature of being a human being. We predict, we imagine, we make meaning. And so when you, the teacher, give your students these 4 story items, whether or not they put it into words or write it down, they're always going to be guessing and imagining. And so then when they come to meet the actual story, this is an opportunity for them to kind of map that story onto the one that they imagined. That's a kind of moment of comparison. And that is really, that process is fantastic for comprehension. It really sets students up to get it. So that's the third thing. Now, the fourth thing is to make students curious, to drive the narrative. This is a word we used before, making use of storytelling devices, maybe narrative hooks, just to make students curious so they actually are motivated and invested in what's coming. And finally, the last thing, number 5, you're using a story here, and that is how you can sell it to your students, or you can tell them it's a video, it's up to you. But what this provides for the teacher is a nice, gentle and natural way in. Now, I'm a great fan of the teacher being a storyteller in the classroom, as you probably know. That does not mean filling the entire class and time with the teacher's voice. Absolutely not. It means using very short stories of a minute or 2 minutes or maybe even 3 minutes that come from you, the teacher. That is the text. But one thing that's quite difficult as a teacher is to go into the classroom and say to your students, I want to tell you a story. That's putting yourself in the spot, isn't it? It's making things quite stressful. This is a way to prevent that. This is a nice, gentle way in. You tell to your students, you're going to meet a story. This is what it involves. These 4 things. What do you think happens? So this provides you, the teacher, with a way in. So these are the 5 different reasons that I just gave you for using this very specific technique. The specific one is story items, but more broadly, this is an example of story priming. Whether the story is a story written, whether it's a story spoken, I'm not going to refer to it as a pre-reading or a pre-listening. I want to call it story priming because it's just a nice acknowledgement of what it actually is. It's not just about reading. It's not just about listening. There's much more to it than that. I've actually made a list of all the different story priming techniques I've got. This is one of about 20. And in my courses, we go into them in some depth. By the way, I don't know if you know that LessonStream is going through a bit of a rebranding right now. There's a brand new website coming with a new look and a new feel, and all my lesson plans will be available there, as will be my courses. So I'll let you all know. I'll keep you up to date. So anyway, what's next? What's next in the list? Just a little by the way here, if you saw this image, which I'm sure you did because this is what was on the email that I sent out, you actually get a still from the video. This elderly woman here with this hand with an egg. And I'm going to guess that you maybe, if you don't know the video we're talking about, you may have thought, I wonder what's going on here. And as soon as your brain asked that question, your imagination will have supplied some answers. We're using here a single still from the video. This is another example of a story priming technique. So there you've got 2 examples of story priming. One is using a still, an image. The other one is using these story items. All right. So let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is the text. Number 2 is the text. Now, I wonder if you agree with me that the natural thing to have done here, after students have got into small groups, and after they've worked together to collaborate on their ideas, to share their theories, and to write down a short text to put into words how they think this prank works. The task is not to guess what happens in the video, but specifically to write down how they think this prank works, and to write down a short text. You could even ask them to imagine that they're actually speaking this. So the text could be of a spoken register, and it's describing a process. So that's the register is a spoken register. The function is describing a process. And that's what students have got to do. Then they compare their text with each other. And then you might think the natural next step is to show them the video. No, if you do that, you're absolutely missing out on a very important and fundamental and incredibly valuable step. And sometimes I like to use this as an example to show how bizarre it would be to move straight to the video. And this is a picture flashcard, one of the most fundamental teaching aids that teachers can use. Here we've got an image of an apple, one of the most fundamental objects for, A is for apple. And so, imagine a teacher is using flashcards and showing an image of an apple and then just throwing the flashcard away without actually teaching the word. And that's what we are doing if we use a short video with a visual narrative without actually verbalizing that narrative for students. To put it another way, students have just spent some time constructing a text and a spoken register to describe a process. Rather than just going straight for the video, why not then show them one of your own, one that you have created beforehand? So let me read this text to you. This is in spoken register, so this is more of a script. So let me tell you, my students, pretend you're my students, how this prank works. Okay, so first of all, you have to approach the first victim with the fake egg in your hand. Okay, so you have to approach the first victim with the fake egg in your hand. Now, you have to make sure that the victim sees the egg. That's very important. And then you surprise them by pretending to break it on their head. All right. Now, when the victim panics, show them that the egg is not real, that it's a fake egg. And then next, suggest that they play the same prank on a second victim. But here's the thing, the switch. Instead of giving them the fake egg, give them the real egg instead. And then sit back and watch as the first victim unintentionally breaks a real egg on the second victim's head. I wonder if you predicted that. But again, we're talking about the driving force behind almost everything we're doing here is curiosity. And students were curious there to listen purely because they had an opportunity to compare the text that they wrote, the ideas that they had, with the actual text here, in this case, written by an expert user of English, if I may be humble enough to call myself an expert user of English. So that's step 2. Step 2 is not to move straight to the video, but to provide a text. And by the way, the text can lend itself to all sorts of different genres and all sorts of different types and registers. In this case, it was a spoken text to describe a process. In another situation, it might just be a short story, a description of the video. If you know my lesson plans, that's probably the more common type of text. But in this case, we're looking at a process. So, number 3, what's next on the list? What comes next? You might think it's the video, but absolutely not. This is another stage which I feel is so often omitted, too often omitted. Now, I work with teachers, and especially in my courses I do at Norwich and my courses I do online at Niall in Norwich, and teachers choose videos to work with, and they do micro teaching, and they show us the activity that they're provided, and they work all the way through it. And I'm so often left with this one big question. And my question is, how did you find this piece of material? How did you find this video? Or how did you find it? or sorry, how did you find it, or how did it find you? What's your connection with it? You know, a video or any piece of authentic material is an artifact. You're presenting it to us. It's almost like show and tell. And I think this is really important. So just take a moment just to tell your students where you found it or how it found. You don't necessarily have to dictate your opinion about it. So the video I'm about to show you, and I'm going to tell you where I found it. It was quite simply, it was a few months ago, 2 months ago, I think. I was working in Graz, and I was working with a group of kids, teenagers, and I was doing what I'm doing with you, I was doing with them. I invited them to share their favorite Instagram videos, and the video I'm going to show you in just a moment was one of the videos that they shared with me, and it made everybody laugh, and I just saw some possibilities for it, and that's why I'm going to show it to you. One thing I'm going to say before I show you this video is that there's something about it that I personally find particularly funny. Something which I find particularly funny. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to show you the video. Now, did you get that? Do you get how much more meaningful this becomes when I just take 30 seconds just to bring you into the picture, just to tell you the teacher, the storyteller's own personal connection with the story? It's difficult to really explain why it happens, but my feeling is that it does happen, that when you put into words the connection that you, the teacher, have with the material, this is setting up the conditions for stronger connections between your students and the material. The other thing I might say is that we can't ever assume, and you know this, don't you, that our students are going to share the same experience, or rather the same enthusiasm for the material that we've chosen as you have. We've all experienced this. Oh, you've chosen a video or a piece of material that you absolutely love. Your students are completely lukewarm, completely indifferent to it, and you leave the classroom at the end of the day with your tail between your legs. Now that's happened, doesn't it? And I think that all we have to do in that situation is change our chip, acknowledge perhaps that everybody might react to this differently. And it's something I might say to students. I think this video I really like it. It makes me laugh. I've got a silly sense of humor. You might not. Let's find out. That's it. That's sometimes all you have to do. But the important thing is just don't assume that everybody will have the same reaction to the video. All right. So step 4 is the video itself. How many of you have actually seen the video? So let me show it to you. This is a video I found, it came to me through these teenagers, one teenager in Graz on Instagram. Here it is.
Wow. Ai, é de mentira. É de mentira. Agora vamos esperar minha mãe sair do banheiro que você vai jogar nela.
Tá bom.
Vira. Ai.
Ney. Oi. Puta que pariu, que é isso, mãe? Gabriel! O que a senhora fez, mãe?
That's much better. That's much better. One of the advantages of it being November, one would have thought, is that you don't need fans. Apparently you do. Wow. Looking forward to the cool this year. Did you like that? Hello, Lambo. How nice to see you there. And thank you, Amina. Your appreciation is appreciated. And Lupe, hello, Lupe. Thank you. And glad to see that you're having fun. So I wonder if how many of you kind of predicted that was what was going to happen. And I wonder if any of you were able to kind of guess that what it was about the video that I, Jamie, find particularly funny. That almost provides us with a task, doesn't it? So what's next anyway? What's the next part? What's next in this 7-step template for working with video here? Let's see what we have on the list. Well, quite simply, back to the text. It's as simple as that. We're going back to the text. That's not what I want to do. That's what I want to do. So text revisited here. So when I said there's something about that video that I find particularly funny, before I read the text to you, I delivered it as a human being would. It was embodied, but now I could show it to you like this. And there's actually a clue in the text which may or may not tell you that thing about the video, which I personally find particularly funny. And this is very carefully crafted because what I want to do is provide students with a good reason to revisit this text in a different way before they listen, now they're reading, and try to find that piece of information in the text that will give them a clue as to why I think the video is very funny. And I'm inviting you here to put your answers into words. What is it about the video that Jamie thinks is particularly funny? I know from experience that this is that most people won't get it. And I also know from experience that there's a 10-minute time delay between me speaking and you hearing me. So I've always got to take that into account. So again, I'm hoping that by setting things up in this way, we're creating a motivating or a motivation for students to actually revisit this text again. That's all part of the design. And assuming that you don't know what the answer is because nobody has, let me show you the video again. All right, let's watch it again. Now you've read my text, let's watch the video a second time. And here we go.
Vó. Ai, ai, é de mentira. É de mentira. Agora vamos esperar minha mãe sair do banheiro que você vai jogar nela.
Tá bom.
Vira, vira, vira. Aí.
Ney. Oi. Puta que pariu, que é isso, mãe? Gabriel! O que a senhora fez, mãe?
So I liked your guesses there, Lambo and Elizabeth, both referring to the look of the elderly woman at the end, and Danielle as well, the woman being surprised at the beginning. Yeah, so you've got the beginning, you've got the end. In fact, these are very funny, I think, but it's not specifically a thing that I'm referring to. And the thing that I think is really funny is when you do this practical joke, and we've mentioned this in the text here, the importance of making sure the victim sees the egg in your hand before you surprise them. And when the elderly woman actually carries out this she doesn't do that. She goes up behind the second victim and almost just smacks the egg on top of her head without even giving the victim any opportunity to see it. So if it had been a fake egg, the joke wouldn't have even worked. She just would have hit the victim with a plastic egg. So I think that for me is the funny thing. I don't know. So yes. So this is a technique, and you'll find this in my lesson plans a lot. I don't always state it, but for me, it's something I would always suggest you do. If we're comparing it with a flashcard, we might show the word apple, then show the image of the apple, then show the word apple again. In this case, we're starting with the text, then we're moving on to the video, and then we're returning to the text. And in the whole video telling thing, which is often at the heart of my activities and lesson plans, there's always a text and a video, and I always suggest starting the text, moving on to the video, and then revisiting the text. In the past, I've referred to this as a video sandwich. I went on to artificial intelligence earlier to try and create an image of a video sandwich. This is the best I could do. So the bread is the text, the video is the meat, and then the bread is the text again. But what you see right there is probably better than my first attempt, which was to try and put the woman in the sandwich in the first place. But that's just far too silly. Trying to make a sandwich out of that egg, grandmother, I think you'll agree. So let's remove her from the screen. Anyway, what's coming next then? So next, I think it's moving on to what we've got here is discussion, analysis, and interpretation. Now, when I say discussion there, that's not to say that discussion has not already happened, because we know as teachers that discussion can just pop up at any time. In a situation like this, where we're moving through the narrative gradually, step by step, setting instructions, giving part of the story, making students curious. At any time, they may ask a question or offer an idea which may spark a discussion, which you might end up writing something on the board, might end up being what we could refer to as emergent language, as teachers often like to kind of categorize it as. That goes without saying, but here we could maybe try for something a bit more structured, a bit more planned, something a bit, I say analysis and interpretation, but using that in a very general way. I mean, what do you think about this elderly woman? What do you think about this grandmother? How do you feel about her being pranked? Do you think it's funny? I can't assume that everybody does. I think on a much more sort of general level, why do we find videos like this funny? What is appealing about it? What is it that it appeals to our human side? I mean, it is very human, isn't it, to prank each other, to play pranks? But why? What is it about pranks that we even have a day of the year designated to them, a designated pranking day, April the 1st. In Spain, it's December, is it Christmas Eve? I can't remember. It's a day in December anyway. But they do tend to be quite important, don't they? I think they can be quite socially constructive. They provide, fun and humor, and as we saw in that video, laughter. But they can also go wrong. They're never safe. They can backfire. We don't want the victim to suffer usually, but the victim can. We can never actually control exactly how the victim or the object of the prank is going to react. So they're not exactly safe. I suppose that's a risk we take. But whatever you say about pranks, every prank is a potential story. I think that's something we can always remember. So every prank video online is a potential story with a process which can be, we can actually apply this framework to. What is at the heart of a prank video is actually a word that Steve, teacher in my community, mentioned yesterday, Schadenfreude, which is a great word. English borrowed it from German. Schadenfreude refers to that very human nature of taking pleasure in other people's failures. So we might watch somebody slip on a banana skin, and as a result, we might laugh. That's Schadenfreude at play. So we can set up a sort of discussion here about the whole theme or the whole topic about pranks in general. Don't forget that reason number 2 for using videos in the classroom is to set up a topic, or rather to introduce a topic. I always think that's quite strange because you're going from straight to the video, straight to the topic. Personally, I always think that setting up a topic is much better for the teacher to do it using a personal story. Whether or not video does it well, I think that possibly we might be outsourcing our jobs to the material. But that's the case. We have introduced a topic. What is the topic? The topic is pranks. At least that is one of them. Let's now explore it. And finally, step number 7 in this framework is students as storytellers. So there's this principle, isn't there, that one story leads to another. If you want to unlock a story in your students, or if you want to unlock a story in your conversation partner, a story is often the best way to do it. You know, you tell one story, it sparks another one in your conversation partner's mind, and they say, oh yeah, and there's this thing. So we're talking about stories with themes. So if the theme is pranks, then you could then set up a task for students to connect with an experience that they have when they were a prankster, or they were a victim, or they were the witness to a prank. Where was it? What happened? Was it a success? Describe the process of the prank and how it worked. Or they could maybe just go to another video on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, and then take that prank video and then put it into their words. So that is still a storytelling task, isn't it? Just putting the narrative of that video into words. Or if they like, they could actually decide to investigate the story behind the elderly woman that we've just seen, the Brazilian egg grandmother, as we could refer to her. Because in fact, it turns out that she is actually quite a prominent Instagrammer in Brazil. And I didn't realize this until more recently, that this channel that she has with her grandson seems to be quite a well-known Instagram video, and they are mini celebrities in their own right. So there's a lot of things we can do there. So really, that brings us to the end. Let me just show you one more time, a couple of things before we go. Again, I'll show you the 7. I would love to know your thoughts. If you've got any questions about this, if you think you could apply this to a similar video, a short video, short in length, strong in narrative, I'd love to know. I'm going to be writing this up and sharing it. Bear with me as long as you're a subscriber. If not, just go to LessonStream.com and you can sign up there, join my mailing list. And I've got more activities coming. This one's coming soon. This is a story lesson plan. It actually makes use of a video. So it uses more or less, it uses the same 7 steps in a slightly different order. Also, this one here is another one. OMG WTH. Again, this makes use of this actually makes use of more prank videos. Again, those 7 steps are all there, but in a very different staging. Okay, and that takes us to the end of the session. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat in case the chat hasn't finished. If anybody's got anything to ask, now is your time. Oh, look at this. Unfortunately, my fan fell over. So although I ran over to the other room to get it, I haven't been benefiting from it. Yes. Oh, is this? I've just seen your comment there. That this is really interesting. That you said she's quite famous in Brazil. And in fact, I hate to be I wasn't going to say this, but I will say this. It was pointed out to me not so long ago that the video I've just shown you, this egg prank, somebody told me that it was staged. And I've watched it several times, and there is a little clue in the video. It might suggest that it was staged, although almost coincidentally, this lesson plan here has got a very serious aim. One of the aims of this lessons plan is actually to investigate what it means for a video to be staged. And one of the many takeaways is that it is not black or white. A video can be semi-staged. If that makes no sense, this lesson plan will make all we'll put everything into perspective. So, you know, for example, the granny might not have been involved in the staging of it. There's lots of different ways to look at it. Thank you very much, Richard. That makes me very happy to hear. Nice to see you here. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's been a pleasure. I'll just keep this going for another 30 seconds or so, just in case anyone else has got anything else to say or anything else to ask. I hope you have a lovely end of your Friday, a great start to the weekend, and maybe you've got some sweeties to eat. If you're American, that means candy. And have a great weekend. And I'll be in touch with some more information about the next Lesson Stream Live. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you again very soon. All right. Take care now. Bye-bye.